Are you willing to accept Christ's invitation to know Him more intimately, love Him more intensely, and follow Him more closely, and then go out into the world and live His good news? If you say yes, then you could be the 13th apostle. Join Dan Duddy and Tom Caffrey, the odd couple of Catholic radio, as they ride the radio waves 2 by 2 to share the goodness, beauty, and truth of Jesus Christ and His church. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the 13th apostle.
Do you not know that the runners in the stadium all run in the race, but only one wins the prize? Run so as to win. Every athlete exercises discipline in every way. They do it to win a perishable crown, but we an imperishable one. Thus I do not run aimlessly. I do not fight as if I were shadowboxing. No, I drive my body and train it, for fear that after having preached to others, I myself should be disqualified. St. Paul, his first letter to the Corinthians. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the 13th Apostle. We explore the good, beautiful, and true of the Catholic faith and the Catholic Church. This is Tom Caffrey with my partner, Dan Duddy. How you doing?
Hey, Tom. How you doing, Tom?
Okay. A little bit of a challenging day. Today was a New York City day, and that's always a challenge for a variety of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One of my sisters, is in a hospital in Manhattan. She had major surgery about a week and a half ago, or a week ago, and she was having all sorts of problems afterward. Doctors couldn't understand. They said, we did everything right, and everything looked good. And she was having more problems, tremendous pain. And they did a CT scan, and something went wrong with the surgery, as it turns out. And she needed surgery right away to correct that problem. It was
Wow.
it was an emergency surgery after the surgery 5, 6 days ago. So
Wow. Mm.
anyway, I visited her today while I was in the city, and she's doing much better. We'll see what the outcome is. But anyway, this is life, right? It's the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah. I mean, it's stressful enough to be in the city for many other purposes, never mind that, and the urgency of such.
Just walking up 8th Avenue.
Yeah,
It's a
right?
pain in the neck.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh gosh. Okay, so that's I almost never stay late enough to get into rush hour because I just can't stand it. I did it for many years. So I usually get out very early. And but because I went to see Carolyn, that got right in the maw of rush hour traffic. So
Mm.
anyway,
You expressed a certain fondness for Carolyn when you said her name. Is she a special?
well, I'll say, especially if they're all listening.
I know, I was afraid when I asked that you might not be able to answer fully.
Yeah, I know you sandbagged me.
What else is new?
We're we're kind of close in age.
Mm.
We both went to the same high school together. So that element, I love my sisters. I enjoy being with them. Well, except for one, but that's a whole nother story. And, three out of four ain't bad,
Yeah,
but
that's funny.
just because of those aspects, we're a bit closer. So
Mhm.
anyway, but she's a sweetheart.
I'm sure.
I was always protective of her.
She's younger than you.
Yeah, a couple of years, and had a deal with a couple of boyfriends
Oh yeah.
in high school. So uh, one who stole money from her,
Ooh.
but I got it back. Let's put it that way.
We'll just leave it at that, Tom.
Put it
Well, you tell me what happened when we get off the air.
that. Uh, okay, so we're just talking a little bit about competition. All the competitions in life that we deal with, there's so often it's competition against the clock, competition against traffic, competition against health problems, all these competitions. St. Paul is saying in his first letter to the Corinthians, by the way, that's chapter 9, verses 24 to 27, he is exhorting us to run to win. But there's a big difference in what he's talking about. I mean, he's making comparisons, but the biggest part is he's talking about, he says the others, those athletes, they do it to win a perishable crown, but we an imperishable one. So what is that, Danny?
It's heaven. That's the crown that the great race he's alluding to is us fighting the good fight, avoiding temptation, always putting one foot forward in front of the other, and achieving that imperishable wreath. That's what he's alluding to, and that means eternal rest with God, winning the race, crossing the line. It's great analogies,
Amen.
though. We referred to him as the first sports writer. You know what's
Oh,
appealing to.
first Christian sports writer.
Yeah, that's right. I think he corrected me on that once before because, well, you're so gosh darn smart and everything. The ancient
Yeah.
Greeks, right?
Probably from the beginning of human history, they did something to entertain themselves. And who could kill the saber-toothed tiger first? You know,
Yeah,
who got their spear or whatever, their lance? I don't know what it would have been called back then, but some sharpened stone attached to a branch. Uh,
yeah. Either Ugg or Og, right? I always put my money on Og.
that's
He's
right.
bigger, stronger, faster. And some claimed he was doing steroids.
Well, that was a little bit of an, like, I don't always say it an audible, but you were ad-libbing just then. So he also says, he says, I do not run aimlessly,
Mm,
you know? And then the next part, which I'm going to, hopefully you remember, when he says, I do not fight as if I were shadow boxing, as if I were boxing air.
yeah.
And that reminds me of an episode we did many years ago, where I was aggravated at something that you thought was insignificant. You said, why are you getting aggravated at that? And I'm standing on principle, as well as on my own 2 feet. And you said, you're shadow boxing. And I said, yeah, that's true. I was, because the person wasn't there, who wasn't, wasn't in front of me. And I wouldn't have been able to say anything anyway. And, we're not going to get into that any further, but it was a great comment by you. And when I read this from St. Paul, I couldn't believe it. I thought right away that, because I don't associate with St. Paul. I associate you with St. Peter
Mm.
for a variety of reasons. A fisherman.
I
Uh,
sleep a lot. I nap at the Transfiguration. I
you're
nap at the Garden of Gethsemane. Things like that.
you blunderbuss in, as opposed to using a high-powered sharpshooting rifle. You're buckshot. Okay,
A buck.
I'm a rifle. You're a buckshot.
Hey, look, just because you had a bad day, okay. But we talk about Paul. He's talking about aimlessly, meaning intentional, and having a north star, having your feet pointed down the road towards something with intentions. And he ties that in with shadow boxing in the same breath, in the same context. And it brings me right back to Caroline, your sister's boyfriend. You don't need to say what happened in that exchange between you and him, but that was not aimless, I'm sure. If there were any boxing involved, it was surely not shadow boxing. And I'm sure if there was boxing, then your eye was on a particular spot that would do harm. But in this case, of course, we're talking about living a life of virtue and avoiding at all costs, temptation and keeping your eye on the prize and down the road and on the finish line. I used to run track, not run track, I coached track. If you were to have a line drawn in the sand left to right down by your toes, and then you stood duck footed at that line so that your toes are touching the line, but you're like duck footed, okay? Maybe 45-degree angles outward. You touch that line. So you take a look at that. Now you take your toes, you lift them up a little bit over the line, and you point them straight north, straight down the road, straight down, whatever. You gain about 2 inches. Your toes gain 2 inches on that line. Now, when you talk about all the steps that we take on this planet Earth, or a 200-meter yard dash, and talk about how many steps are pointing down the road, gaining 2 inches per step, You are really getting to your destination a whole lot faster by the sheer nature of having a target and having your toes point to that target. When you take that analogy and you put it to your soul, you're much more clearer on your path to where you need to get, and you get there much more cleanly. It's a really interesting, I would say, allegory or analogy to getting down that narrow path that Paul is actually putting us on to this finish line. You know, there's so many great messages in the world of sports that happen in the best of locker rooms when it comes to lessons like that, that our listeners and tragically so many of our athletes don't get to hear unless a Catholic Christian coach, as we're speaking here in Catholic terms, takes on that role and really fulfills it and holds him or herself accountable to the amount of Catholicism and truth that can be taught in any sport locker room based on the analogies that Paul brought us to a couple thousand years ago. So yeah, and your son Kevin himself played in our football program at Monsignor Donovan Catholic High School, where we had begun to become super
Where
comprehensive
you
in
were
the
head
very
coach.
same area, huh?
Where you were head coach.
Where I was head coach. And we had become, as a program, very comprehensive in the area of resolutions and knowing that satisfying our vows, VOWS, which is it's an extinct term these days, it seems, was a vital part of our masculinity on the football field. So you as dad, you told me that you had seen some changes in that wonderful young man who was just on a show last week. But in its simplest terms, we were comprehensive in its simplest terms, but we became a flagship program for the nation through two organizations called Sports Leader and the Catholic Athletes for Christ. And that's where I met Marianne Harold. Our work was becoming known, and I was called in to be honored on behalf of my football program in Chicago, indirectly and directly. I could explain that later, but it would take too much time. By the Chicago Bears and Patrick McCaskey, owner of the Bears, who was started a foundation and a platform to recognize people who were doing what I'm talking to you about. Marianne Harold, I didn't know the woman before, but man, right away, she hit it off immediately with my wife Maura, and we all became dear friends, along with Marianne's sister Angela Tomlinson. So there is truly some wonderful, wonderful things that are going on in sports and spirituality, but on all levels. But the mainstream media just doesn't cover that, Tom. They don't go there. That's not good news.
No, it's I've already told you. I'm sure I said it on the air multiple times that I have very little involvement with sports these days. I don't have a lot of time now to do that, but I don't enjoy it nearly as much as I used to because of the non-sports stuff that goes on. But the virtues of the sporting life, until the end of human history. They all, what St. Paul is talking about, the character that it can build. I mean, it's one quick story about my son that you mentioned. When I know I shared this with you, when he had you all 4 years in high school, and one morning, so it was during the football season, one morning, a school morning. I went in. He was up and he wasn't up, and so I went in there and he just seemed a little out of it, and I felt his forehead, and he had a fever. And I said, "Ah, well, you're not going to be able to. You should probably stay home because it." Then I checked. It was a little high, more than just a little high. You should have seen him. He practically jumped out of the bed, pleading with me not to keep him out of school because he was going to let down his if he couldn't go to school, then he couldn't go to practice afterwards. Then he couldn't play in the game on Saturday, or it could have been Friday night. And I'd never seen him like that. It really moved me. I mean, I was deeply touched by it, and I thought, wow, who's this Coach Duddy? I got to find out more about him. And he didn't want to let down his team,
Yeah.
and so that was a beautiful experience. I'll never forget it. And it's many years since. Obviously, I haven't forgotten it, and I never will. So these are the things. This is how sports and other endeavors too certainly can change us. We have this purpose and then a mission to fulfill that purpose. And you got to have a leader. It's the coach, it's the captain on the field. That's the captain, the coach on the field and in the arena. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt, that great expression. I wish I had it memorized, but he's talking about being in the arena.
Mhm.
And he's talking about the critics who are criticizing people that are in the arena, but they're doing it outside of the arena. And he's saying, you want to comment or critique, you have to be in the arena. You got to get bloody. You got to get messy. You got to have tears. All this thing, you just put yourself in, and that builds that character. There's another passage from St. Paul, and this too, unfortunately, I don't have from memory, but there's a chain of events of things that happen, when you that build character as a follower of Jesus Christ, as long as you're willing to be in the arena of faith. Humility. I mean, this. I don't know. I think hopefully every youth sports kid learns the old expression, there's no I in team, right?
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
and Jesus sends us out two by two,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Kevin is very special, and it became immediate that he was. And I'm not saying that because you're his dad, but I'm glad to tell you this. And with all my heart, when Kevin came to us, he was a well-formed young man at a young age, spiritually, and in his maturity and his wisdom. What young men don't know, and now Kevin is probably upwards of what, 30 something. He's coming to know this now as we grow through our ages, as we go from a young man to onward to being a sage, which I guess I am, is that we leaders at age 45, I think I was then, and I'm turning 70 soon, we become inspired by the likes of that Kevin that I just explained to you. And what we do is, if we can recognize the virtues in a young man, good for us, but moreover, good for him, because we need to let him know that he has inspired us by those virtues, and we will not let him down. And we'll fan the fires of his hungers and his thirst, because he was a hungry young man for the greater good. And it made us better coaches. Now, there were thankfully many Kevins on that football team. We were a good football team. But there were also those who really came in banged up and wondering. I couldn't tell you that they were so hungry and thirsty up front and center, but they were hungry and thirsty like Kevin underneath some rubble. And they're the ones that we really had to go into, But the Kevins of the world, they had expectations, and we had to hold ourselves accountable to them. So we're working as coaches who are comprehensive about the things we already talked about, bringing young boys into Christ-like manhood. That we need to work both ends. And as far as team goes, you said team was important to him. Team is kind of disappearing now in sports and high school sports. I coached high school football last year. 3 of those high school football players have transferred to other schools since last year rather than staying with their team to make their team better and to get more exposure, to be recruited on higher college ranks. Now, I've talked to today's college coaches, and they don't like, really, particularly that kind of athlete, to do such things because they don't have trust in him for the 4 years that they might play on their college football team. So what I like to say to a young man who's got his head bigger than, the clouds, or up in the clouds because he's a pretty good athlete, is that if you stay with your football team, and rather than posting on, social media, I'm leaving, I'm going to a bigger, greater school, look at me, look at me, look at me, say, I'm staying with my brothers. You will be far deeply and profoundly recruited by much greater schools, so-called greater schools, for you being that man. But this culture doesn't fan that fire, Tom. They fan the opposite fire. So it's a difficult situation that we're in right now with sports, and it's trickling all the way down into high school. College football players are getting paid now. They're all being offered money to come out of high school and come to their particular schools. It's getting flat out ugly. But it's in that huddle that we become men, that we all have an assignment. There are 11 assignments that make the play go or not go. And we break the huddle together, and we get to the line of scrimmage on one count. We heard the count. That's the snap count. We know whether it's going to be on hike, set, 1, 2, whatever the cadence might be of that particular high school. And we get a good split up there. We get a good split on the line of scrimmage so that everybody can do their job. But moreover, so we can separate the defense so that we can see the defense more clearly. You see, Satan loves chaos. He likes to tighten it up. He likes to get in the crowd. So we separate that defense so we can see the enemy more clearly. And then we get out of our stance all together in unison on that particular count. And then we hit the enemy, we block the enemy, and you aim small and you miss small. Aim small, miss small. And that goes right back to Paul and his calling to us to not be aimless and to not shadow box. Yeah.
Well said. You started out by referring to yourself as a former track coach running the race.
Yes.
Obviously, you can't play a game like in football. You can't be staring as a player on the field. You can't be staring at the goal line or at the end zone. You got to be in the moment. As you say, where your feet are. You got to play the play, right? And then let the other everything will take care of itself. If you do what you're supposed to do each play, no matter what the sport, the odds are better. Let's put it this way, that you'll get into the end zone.
That's right.
Of course, if the other team on defense, if every one of those players does what they're supposed to do, then
No, it's a battle. It's a battle of that, Tom.
battle.
Yeah, battle of discipline, to be vigilant, to be diligent, to be of one mind, and to do it for each other. Track and field has got some pretty cool virtues in it that, yeah, your track team will win or lose at the end of all of the events. But when you're out there, you got to be the absolute best you can be, and you're always looking for your personal best. You're always looking to better your previous, time on the stopwatch that you've got the last time you went out. So a lot to be said for sports and what it does in the level of Christianity. And I'll turn it right back over to you. One of my biggest signs or posters that I put in the locker room, in my football locker room, was Christians always get back up. And it's a picture of our Lord Jesus Christ getting back up on his feet for the third time. Thank God.
Powerful image. Thank God. That's right. Literally, during the 2024 Summer Olympics and the Paralympic Games, for disabled,
Mm.
disabled in the normal aspects of society, but they're showing their abilities in these Paralympic Games. And the church in France, all across France, they set up the Holy Games, and they would have a variety of events, most of them spiritual in nature and religious in nature, in a variety of parishes and dioceses throughout France.
Wow.
It was really, I thought that was a great idea. And to linkage to the Olympics, I thought we should be doing more things like that.
Mm.
Where you, I would imagine it's easier to do when you're in a country that's hosting the Olympics because of what the Olympics are and what they represent. And as you referenced, going back to ancient Greece. So it's a little easier to do that as opposed to out of nothing. But I just wonder whether any other diocese in the world, whether they, so we're 2025 now, a latter part of 2025. I wonder whether has been any talk in any parish in the world again to say, why don't we do something like the Holy Games? Make it a big deal. Each country, select parishes or select dioceses. Probably dioceses would be better, but I mean, it could be a number of things. But I'm going to say this is I'm a little uncomfortable saying this only because of the usual connotation. But in the Holy Games, if you're playing the Holy Games, well, then you're going to win. In this case, there's not going to be a loser.
That's right. Yeah.
And St. Paul says only in the sporting games, there can only be one winner.
Mm.
But obviously, there's not just one winner in our faith. I mean, Christ wasn't saying, "Hey, there's only me one of you out of all humankind.
Yeah.
Only one of you is gonna end up with me." No,
Yeah.
not at all. He came here for everybody.
The body gets lost in the games. The body gets lost in athletics. And we find that, we sometimes put the body over the soul, above the soul. And then when we come out of those games and our body's no longer getting it done, you wonder who the heck you are now. You wonder, what this soul actually is. And your very being can go into some question, and that can be very, very scary. And it's common with our athletes who are, say, for example, in the NFL, which stands for not for long, to get shot out of the backside of the NFL, with that cannon into so-called real life. And they're like, man, I have no idea. I have no idea who I am. I gotta take this jersey off now. I listened to Mother Angelica today. Somehow she jumped in on my cell phone, and she talked about how the body will let you down. We're all going to die, but your soul stays young. And she pointed to her head. In your head, you might be 18, 19 years old, and it's true.
Well, we are going to have the resurrection of the body.
It goes right back to and that's what I'm going toward is the passion of the Christ. The body on the cross, and then we have the resurrection. As we know, on our Lord showed us the way.
We're going to be new creations, as Jesus tells us, and certainly in the book of Revelation. When we talked before a little bit about going the wrong way, if we're not taught the virtuous sporting life, and as you said, when you lose your jersey, and you shared with the audience about losing, giving up your varsity football jacket when you got, as soon as you entered into college, and you were kind of mocked into taking it off by classmates, and you had an identity crisis. It's especially understandable since you were really number one in the state of New Jersey. You and your team were number one, undefeated. Hardly anybody experiences that in life.
Yeah.
So, it made me think of, we only got a minute left. I want to get this in, that our dear friend Jim Mulvihill sent me a book, What It Is Like to Go to War. And the author was writing about how all the training that soldiers get or military personnel get, certainly combat veterans in the making, but they get no psychological or spiritual training to deal with what they're doing and how to process it, which makes it so difficult for so many. And we're going to have a guest, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. And this is just a tease, but it was a combat veteran in Vietnam. If you're going through something, and life is the most difficult thing in some ways, if you're not trained how to think about that, how to work with that. Not the easy things. Well, we do, because we have to learn how to be humble. We have to remain humble in our successes. We also have to be able to handle the failures, of which we will have many.
Our listening audience needs to know that we just need to, because I go through it right now too. We're always going through phases in our life where we're going to get those identity gaps. And just get back to your knees and back to prayer. And that's what I do best. Stay tuned, folks, for the Angelus and Your Prayer Intentions with Peter and Jemmy.
WQPHradio.org. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Danny. God bless you, buddy.
Thank you, Tommy. God bless you all.
Thank you for listening to the 13th Apostle with Dan Duddy and Tom Caffrey. For more information on Dan, visit his website at www.danduddy.com or email dcduddy@gmail.com. Tom's website is faithpilgrims.com or email trcaffrey@faithpilgrims.com. How about you? Will you be the 13th apostle?